Ah, hello. Welcome to the Proving Grounds. Today we are going to oversee a tale of 7 adventurers who overcome the odds of their tales to... What is it, Aisha? 8. I don't remember this story having 8. What? Welcome everyone to SaGa Frontier Remastered for the PS4, the Nintendo Switch, PC, and mobile. We're looking at the Switch version as it's currently the only one with a physical release. Originally there was an announcement of a PS4, but then it just mysteriously went poof. Could still happen though, because lately Romancing Saga 3 got a physical PS4 version this year, and Romancing Saga 2's remaster that has been out for quite a long time digitally is getting a PS4 and Switch physical version at the end of this year. So it's all cool. So there could be a chance of that PS4 one popping back up. My understanding is Koei is doing those for the Asian market, but I digress. Let's get to the main thing here. So SaGa Frontier Remastered. I grew up with SaGa Frontier on the PS1, and I actually beat 2 of the 7 original tales. So this was a very interesting thing that we visit, because I did play all of the characters, but I've only ever finished 2 of them in the original version. So I have a lot to draw from in comparison these. So we mastered, to just get a few things out of the way. Well, actually maybe I should just start with the story. Yeah. Now, we got 8 characters instead of the original 7 in Remaster. And I obviously don't want to go into, like, long-windedness. So I'm going to also try and put a chart here that'll give, because one of the things is you can choose outside of the new 8th character, which I'll explain how he works. You start out still with the 7 characters, but you can choose any of those 7 characters. So I'm going to have a chart, give a quick explanation on what I would recommend, or how I would recommend that character towards you. But I'll give a quick rundown of each character's story. You have a bard, who is just a bum. You have a superhero revenging his parents. A wife or a bride to be riddled with the blood of her love. A robot who has forgotten his sacred mission. A monster out to save their homeland. A wizard out to defeat his brother to prove he is the better of the two. A poor girl transfused with mystic blood, feeling lonely in 2 societies. And then our new character, a detective, an officer of the law. The law! But yeah, I'll have a chart here displayed to give an idea of what each character, because they're all significantly interesting different ways they'll play. Like, the bard is a lot more open-ended, why, say, like, Wed's story, the superhero character, has a good bit of linearity before his starts giving you a little bit of freedom. So, you know, there's a little differences, and I'll try to point those out. But I'll let the chart do that. So let's get into this. So, SaGa Frontier Remastered. First thing I definitely want to talk about is the differences. Obviously, there are a lot of accessibility options and some interesting choices. So, the original system for SaGa Frontier was the idea that you finish a character storyline and then carry over the fact that you finish that character's story and start a new character. What this originally did was slowly boost the kind of gear and stats that characters that you recruit into your party start with, compared to just your first playthrough. So over time, each playthrough would make the characters start out a little better than they would normally. And it also can affect the monster level a little bit to that. But in general, the main coup de grace on doing all the characters would be unlocking the dev room upon completing all the characters. You would get the dev room. Now, Remastered adds a new element. While you can continue to use this old element, you can use a new element called New Game Plus that didn't exist. Now, New Game Plus, when you select it, will ask you what things you want to carry over. You can carry over enemy rank, and I'll go into what enemy rank is when we get into the combat and stats and stuff. HP, JP, WP, attributes, credits, items, skills, spells, mystic ability, monster abilities, monster types, programs. You can choose what you want to carry over or not carry over, allowing you to customize your difficulty upon using New Game Plus. Now, what does New Game Plus do exactly? As it says, it carries over these things. So your progression of your characters, like let's say, I started as Wed, went through Wed's storyline. If I get the characters Wed got in a storyline, and I let all that stuff carry over, the next character I choose, if I get those party members that Wed got, they would know all that stuff, have all that stuff and things. Carrying over enemy rank is an interesting option to make the game more difficult too, because that is so many things to talk about, because this is such a bizarre JRPG even to today's standards. So if you're not familiar with SaGa games do not traditionally have a leveling system. They usually have many bizarre systems in place, and the general thing that's usually across almost the entire series is that they gain stats through combat. Now, that might sound familiar to you if you're not familiar with SaGa, but more familiar with Final Fantasy, because it sounds awfully lot like Final Fantasy 2, don't it? And that's with good reason, because the person behind Final Fantasy 2 is basically the overarching main person behind the entirety of the SaGa series. Ooh. But don't let that detour you, because, 2 was interesting, the NES just couldn't do those ideas very well. But anyway, so, your characters are in a system where they do actions, they gain abilities and stats and that upon the actions they do. So it's kind of a Western, I always like to simply say that SaGa, a lot of SaGa games are like taking Western RPG ideas and twisting them with Japanese shit, is what I always like to compare a lot of SaGa games to. Now, the enemy rank is basically how the enemies become stronger. Normal enemies do become stronger over time as you fight enemies. Now, it is important to note that different environments have a max and lower rank. Like, for example, an area might never be below rank 4 regardless of whenever you enter there. Even if you were to get there at the very beginning of the game, that area's lowest might be only set to rank 4, while there could be an area that might never go above rank 2 regardless of you being at the highest rank that enemies can be. So there is a balancement to ensure that there are places that you can go to be safe if you need to grind stats and abilities. But in general, enemies go up in difficulty with you in the normal sense of the game. Now, if you use the New Game Plus and don't carry over the enemy rank, that can actually give you huge benefits when playing another character. Like, when I did it with Loot, we beat his story in 40 minutes. We devastated fucking everything. Just annihilated everything. Just destroyed it all. It was just a flick of a finger. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. So, this is the type of game that you'll encourage to build your characters up properly, but not overindulge, because you could also be making things worse for yourself. Because everything goes up, including bosses. Bosses also get more powerful, so you don't want to go too crazy at the same time, but you do want to get stuff. So The New Game Plus feature, depending on how you carry things over, can either keep the difficulty curve going up, or you could essentially make each other character after your first playthrough a lot easier as more and more characters actually get built up in other characters' storylines. It can essentially make the game vastly easier if you choose to certain things like the enemy rank to not carry over on that. Again, this feature was not in the original game. You had to use the old system, which again you can still use, which is appreciated. That's probably the nice thing overall about this remaster, is that allows you to basically use all the original shit of how the game worked. You are not mandatory to really use all the new stuff. Probably the only thing you can't really do is item descriptions were very vague, at least in the original American version. I'm not sure how they were in the Japanese version. That they are not vague in what they do in the remaster, so there's no like toggle option for that regard. So you're kind of screwed in that department. So you're not gonna be able to really change that. But I think that was a more of a benefit, because I mean honestly, you would be amazed what kind of crazy stats that some equipment can change that you would have absolutely no idea in the original game, because it told you virtually nothing really about what most gear did. It really didn't. So that's actually a nice improvement in my opinion, because there's a lot of different stats and resistances and things that it's very important to really know, honestly. Like, I kind of feel like they took advantage of people with strategy guides. I mean, the PS1 era, PS1, PS2 era were pretty well known for trying to get you to shell out money for a strategy guide, you know. I mean, just look at Final Fantasy IX's guide. That was just a nightmare. Terrible idea. Oh, God. Now, SaGa Frontier uses a 5-party team members, but in an interesting twist, with you could say a dash of SaGa, a dash of Suikoden, you can get quite a few characters. Now, in the original version, you could only make 3 teams, and once you got more characters than those 3 teams could fill up, you didn't have access. They joined you, but you couldn't swap them in. That actually was fixed in the remaster, so you can actually go beyond the 3 teams and switch between those characters. An interesting little fix for those who like getting every single character they can humanly get. But generally, I don't really change the teams very much, but it's there if you're willing and wanting to level up a whole lot of characters of that. Or stat grind, I should say. But it's a 5-party team, and if you're, again, familiar with SaGa games, this uses a lot of the traditional system that a lot of SaGa games have, where you have humans, mystics, machines, and monsters. Not always present in every single SaGa game, and different SaGa games have done other things that are outside that, but many early SaGa games did follow this formula, and each of these have their different ups and downs. Like, machines can equip tons of different gear items and multiple of the same kind of gear item to get strong stat buffs. But their potential of growth is limited to their gear, so they have a ceiling that is, you know, lost when you reach the pinnacle of the best gear you can get. While other characters, like humans, have a much higher skill, a much higher ceiling. You just have to walk towards them. Mystics are kind of a hybrid of a part human, part a special magic user. So, and mystics in different SaGa games have worked a little differently. Like in the original SaGa 1 game on the Game Boy, which was Final Fantasy Legends, mystics just randomly learned abilities after combat. Mystics in SaGa Frontier absorb monsters and attach those abilities to their special mystic gear. So they'll partially able to tap into like a human, like they scale up like humans, you know, they go on stats and stuff after combat based on what they do as a human, but with their mystic attached gear, they can use monster skills that they absorbed from monsters, which is an interesting little combination with them. Now, monsters are in a similar boat with robots, but in a different way. Monsters absorb monsters to change, and they get abilities after they change. Now, you can keep all these different abilities as you change, but when you change to a new monster, if you want the next ability, you have to choose to sacrifice something. It is also important to note that in the original version, it would sacrifice, I believe, the skill that was on the top of the list, and I don't think it was an option. I think it mandatorily always changed. Luckily, in this one, you can just choose that you do not want to, or you can choose what skill you want to replace, which is, again, a nice little quality of life difference there. But monsters similar to robots have a ceiling that they're gonna hit, and that's gonna be based on the type of monster they become, because outside that you're not gonna get higher, so they have a ceiling as well. So monsters and robots a lot of times can become really overpowered at the beginning of the game if you know where to get the right stuff or the right monsters to absorb to evolve into certain monster types. But late game, they can sometimes become a bit more of a hindrance. So, but it is a good idea to try and have a balance. I do recommend at least having one of each type of these characters in your party in each storyline. It is not necessary, and of course, depending on how you know, the kind of RPG person you are, you a glass cannon, or you a big heavy, I just want everyone to be giant meat shields and stuff, you know, how you strat, you know, you can make lots of different party combinations. There can be benefits and strategies to using tons of monsters and robots, because monsters have a lot of unique abilities that humans can't ever get. Only mystics would be able to barely tap into some of that. There are a lot of disadvantages and advantages. It just all depends on how much you want to tip into the game and mess with. And there's lots of things to discover: gear, equipment, abilities, combinations, and such. And on top of all that, speaking of which, there are combos. Now, combos are where moves all combo together to do even more damage, which is where you really get into the heavy hitting shit in this game. You want to freaking massively deal a lot of damage, you need to learn how to do combos. And there are a lot of ways to do combos, trigger combos. Now, combos, something different in the Remastered. Now, my understanding, the original release in Japan had this combo menu that's in the Remastered version. But apparently, because of localization and how much text was taken up in making the combo name, because apparently in Japan the combo name was literally every single move one after another, and that was considered too long and complicated to be able to put in the PS1 version of the localization. So that's why they just made it a combo level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the American version, but they took out the combo menu. Well, it's put back in the Remastered, and it tells you the combo. It remembers combo history. You can set up combo favorites to remember. And I do want to point out that this thing is weird for one particular fight in Wiki's storyline near the end. There was a boss fight you have to actually do high amounts of combos, and I just want to say this because it was super confusing to me. So I just want to save you time if you haven't checked out this game. Combos in the combo history will count as seen it. So keep that in mind if you encounter that boss. Now, some other additions they also did in this is the story tab, which is supposed to help you kind of keep on task on where to go and what to do with each character. SaGa Frontier was a very interesting experiment because it's essentially an open world game. Now, keep in mind the original release was a PS1 game, and you have to kind of scope in for that time period. Because, you know, these days when you think open world, you think GTA, Elder Scrolls, Fallout. You think of a lot of stuff like that, Assassin's Creed. But on the PS1, like, I mean, the first Elder Scrolls game that came to console was Morrowind, the third game on the original Xbox. The PS1 had virtually nothing that really was a open world that wasn't usually linear or anything in an RPG sense. So, SaGa Frontier was really a strange entry in that way. You do, as most of the characters, have a lot of freedom to just go about almost a lot of the areas in the game and do tons of side stuff. So it definitely is a open, like, when you compare it to its time period, a open world game of its time. But compared to obviously stuff of our time now and here and now, or even the last few console generations, it's a vastly smaller game compared to now. But yeah, like I said, you gotta have to look into the time period it came out for RPGs. You didn't really find stuff like this on the PS1, especially from Japan. Japan JRPGs were some linear things almost all the time. You didn't usually get this amount of crazy freedom to just go wherever and that. To go wherever, to do all kinds of bizarre side quest things, you know. Now, when it comes to human mystics, you have magic and techniques you can do. Techniques that are with swords, guns, and martial arts. Sometimes there's also special stuff, depending on characters and that. There's magic, and there's also dodging. So there's a lot of different techniques and things your characters can get. And just like under magic itself, there's all kinds of branches of magic to learn. Lots of fun stuff, you know. And each character's play will have a lot of differences because you can't always get every single character with every storyline. So there are some characters you won't get access to. Some characters are literally unique to one person's storyline. So you can't always benefit from the exact same team of characters in every single person's storyline. And some characters have unique skills that literally nobody else in the game has, so there are all benefits to using some unique characters because sometimes they have things literally no one else can ever learn. And New Game Plus actually puts a little curve to that in a few ways. A good example is with magic. So there is a character in the game that can essentially gain all magic in the game. Normally, that would only work in that storyline. But because of New Game Plus, it causes that character, when they join you in other character storylines, if you do that storyline first, that character can have potentially basically all freaking magic, including magic that normally a character wouldn't be able to have. Now that might not seem like a big deal at first, but you gotta understand magic has a very yin and yang system in this game. The simplest one is with light and dark magic. You can't have both of them. You can only have one, and every magic is like that. There is a yin to its yang, and you can only pick one or the other, the master. You can't have both. So this one character that, because of story reasons, can gain all the magic can actually really break even more New Game Plus. It's pretty crazy. The New Game Plus really opens the door on a lot of new things you wouldn't be able to do in the original version. Because you can carry almost all gear over to another person's story. Like, I think literally the only gear that I know that doesn't carry over is one side dungeon that uses 3 gear items as keys to into a tomb. Those don't carry over, and the pendants that are in Wiki's storyline, that are the main point of Wiki's journey, is to gather these pendants. Those can't carry over into anyone else's story, but basically literally everything else can. Even some of the most powerful weapons that can only be found in one character's story can be carried over to someone else's story that in the original version would never be able to get unless you like hack the game or something. So there's a lot of new, like, I think like speedrunners are gonna find this really interesting, oddly, because there's just so much new shit you could do for speedrunning in this game. And I'm not a big speedrunner person, but I just find it interesting that it opens a door to a lot of new strats and ideas and things. Now, Fuse, the new character in Remastered, was actually originally a character that was going to be a main character in the original version, but he was cut, and a bit of story content for the Mystic character was also cut. That story content was actually re-added into her story in the Remaster, which is a nice touch. Now, with Fuse is a very subjective character to me, because when he was first announced, a lot of people were like, yay, yay, and I agree, it was actually exciting to have a whole new character in his storyline, except he didn't have his storyline. So, the devs said that they gave an outline of what Fuse's scenario was, but they decided not to do it. What they did do is interject Fuse into everyone's storyline. So, when you unlock Fuse, you have to beat one character and Fuse will be unlocked. And when you select Fuse, out of all the characters you've finished, he will have a case file of one of those characters. And it basically interjects that character's storyline with Fuse, and it's kind of mixed bag. Like, sometimes there's some interesting info or perspective or some additional background info you learn in it that could be applied to the original story, but essentially it seems kind of pointless to me because, how to put, almost none of them can be canon. Like, it's not done in the way where it's like, oh, Fuse was in the background, oh, no. Like, he radically changes several characters' storylines. Like, for example, like in Wiki's storyline, like, as I said, Wiki is gathering these pendants. In Fuse's version of doing the case file for Wiki, he's gathering all the pendants before Wiki does. So it completely changes Wiki's storyline in how the events go about. And it seems just really weird to me. It does give more life to the game, but I kind of feel like it's more filler, because you're just replaying 7 characters' storylines with some differences, and it rushes through those, like, it literally just, there's like a quick highlight. Sometimes you might fight 2 bosses and then go straight to the final boss, but a lot of times they just go right to the final boss after doing a whole bunch of recapping. Now, it does give you the opportunity as Fuse, and this is the interesting thing about Fuse, you get access to a new character, Win, who is a character that's in some storylines, but was never a playable character in the original version, so that's one thing Fuse gets, and Fuse can basically recruit everyone. He's the only character that can recruit every single main character. Basically, nobody can recruit every single main character. You can get some of them, like Luke can be recruited by anyone. Like, that was actually the big thing with Luke in the original. He was one of the few main characters that could, well, he is the only main character that every other main character can recruit. But Fuse now can recruit everyone. Though, with one of them, you do have to finish that character's storyline to get her to be available. But he can potentially recruit everyone. And there was a reason for that. I'll go into spoilers about that. But Fuse's storyline was really disappointing to me, because it's just retrending on the story events, and there's, like I said, there's some funny stuff, there's some interesting info, especially in the Mordor case, that one actually adds a little interesting insight that you didn't get in the original version, but yeah, I just kind of felt like it was just needless filler, probably trying to make up for the fact that New Game Plus kind of makes the game go a little faster if you use it, so yeah. But SaGa Frontier is a very bizarre beast. It is. It's indeed. But I definitely recommend it. I enjoyed the remaster. Now, complaint-wise, usually, you know, when I talk about these kind of remaster, remakes, ports, and things, I basically go about, like, do I feel like it replaces the original? What are the benefits of going with each one? Obviously, you have New Game Plus, fuses scenarios, and that going for the remaster. Friendly little features like New Game Plus that carry over characters' stat growth abilities and such over to another character's playthrough in that, which is a very nice thing. That is a very nice feature that can be used to make it harder or easier. There's a lot of things you can do with that. That gives you a lot of fun to customize your experience with the game. I think that's a very interesting idea. But I think some of the hindrances, now, you do have the original music track, and because the game was on the original standard TV, there was a mix of some areas they were able to make widescreen, because areas were that, but there are some areas that were a actual piece of artwork that doesn't scroll side to side. That's all it is that picture. And in those case scenarios, they added borders of some of the artwork from the game, and I think that was a fair thing to do, because I mean it was made for original television, so there wasn't a whole lot they could easily do about that. But the big thing they did with the remaster was the graphics. So they redid all the graphics of the characters and monsters in the game, and that has its ups and downs. I definitely don't think it's as bad as some of Square Enix's past stuff. Like, lately they've been doing a much better job in this remastering. Like, the romancing sagas they did recently turned out really good and faithful to a lot of this stuff of that. So, the menu has been updated. Now, to be fair, the original menu isn't exactly anything to wag a bone at, so but it is functional and everything, and it was mainly made this way for the mobile version, which isn't shocking at all, because that has been something Square Enix has been overall doing with a lot of these, is trying to have them be on mobile as well. Like the Crystal Chronicles thing was put up mobile. Oh lord, poor Crystal Chronicles. But I would say the two biggest things that were questionable to me is, one's minor to me, and the other one's a little more iffy. First, the characters. So the character sprites were all redone in a more painted style. They were painted over and everything. Overall, they are pretty faithful to the original designs in that. They added more hair detail, which, depending on your opinion, may be better or just look a little overdone, maybe. But I think the thing that will probably bother people more is their faces. So there is a aesthetic look to how the faces are in the remaster between the original, and it is aesthetically different. Is it the end of the world? No, it's not. It's not the Final Fantasy V mobile. Let's put it that way. Oh fucking what a horrible version to play that game. Oh, poor people. Now, when it comes to sprites, like, I like the original sprites. Like, I greatly appreciate people who take the time that make the sprites for retro-looking games. Like, it's definitely not something that's easy to do, especially when you're animating them really nicely. It's a craft. And I just, I don't know if it's bias, nostalgia, that, but I just feel more appreciation towards the sprites. But that honestly isn't a huge loss. Like, it depends on how much from person to person, but I think it's definitely not Final Fantasy V mobile levels of it's so fucking awful. Please don't play that. That's probably the only good thing, they're taking that off Steam and replacing it with that pixelated perfect version of that, or whatever the hell they're calling those. That looks much better, but still not my cup of tea compared to the original Final Fantasy V sprites, but that's getting into a whole different way. Now, the thing that I did get bothered from was the monsters getting the same treatment. Now, not all of them are bad. A lot of them are decent there, but there's some of them that look really weird with the new painted over look. Some of them just look really weird, and again, that's a very subjective thing. But I found several of them just didn't look right. Like, they just looked really bizarre. But there were some that turned out really nice. Several humanoid ones. Like, there's a funny anime catcall one that was... It's just funny. Oh, there's some weird fucking monsters in this. But then again, you know, Final Fantasy VII had a half-skeleton motorcycle outside Midgard, so... But overall, though, honestly, I think this is probably one of the best remasters Square Enix has done out of the original library, honestly. You know, the last few Final Fantasies they did with mobile, with Final... If you haven't realized it, I don't like that Final Fantasy mobile game that they did. It's so fucking awful looking. It's so awful looking. But that to me is the worst thing they fucking ever did. This is probably the best thing they've ever fucking done, really, honestly. And to be fair, though, I haven't played the SaGa, not SaGa, well, the SaGa Romancing 3 and 2 versions they did. Though I do have the Romancing SaGa 3, and I have the physical version for the PS4 of 2 ordered. That's supposed to come out on the 23rd, and I'm very excited to get that. Very excited, because that's a very interesting game that never got fully translated. So, very exciting. Very, very, very exciting for that one. But the big question is, do you want to replace the original version with this? Like, if you had neither game and you're debating, do you want the original experience? Do you want to get the remaster? Or if you want the option to experience the original experience, do you get that option? So, the original experience argument. You can essentially, for the most part, get the original experience in the remaster. You can have the new content not be added into the Mystic storyline and not worry about Fuse. You can do that. You can decide to not use New Game Plus and use the original version where the game saved after finishing a character storyline on a separate little data thing to keep track of the characters you finished and things, and allow characters to learn abilities a little quicker upon going into another character story and another character story, that you can experience that. So you can overall have a pretty faithful original experience in the remaster. But, like I said, when it comes to looking at gear, though, there's no toggle to, like, hide what gear does. You get the full-blown all info about it. There's no sequence to the gear anymore in this version. So, that's one thing you can't really revert backwards. So, you get the bells and whistles, like those speed up options and stuff in the game to make things go faster. So, you get all the bells and whistles, but overall you can still experience the original experience in the game. So, aesthetically, I think the big big argument between the two versions is the aesthetics. I think that's because the music's literally the fucking same. Like, at least to me, I literally can't hear a fucking thing. Like, I've heard other people say the same thing, that they literally did nothing to the music, which I think is good because the music is really fucking good. Over the years, I've always came back to some of the final boss music songs from Frontier. It's good shit, man. Is some excellent shit. So I think the big argument, like I said, is just going to be the aesthetics. Are the bells and whistles and fuse enough for you to sacrifice the old sprites of the PS1 version? Or is that not as big a deal to get the bells and whistles and some of the extras? I think overall, I would recommend the remaster, even though Fuse, I wasn't really impressed with his storyline, how his storylines are done. I think the remaster is pretty good. It gives you a lot of options to make it harder or easier to customize the experience, which I think is always a better way than just making really simple toggles easy, normal, hard. I think having some customization in that, I think, adds a lot to the game. So overall, I would recommend the remaster over the original. I think it's good enough. But you know, if you do like that nostalgic old PS1 though, it wouldn't necessarily hurt you to check out the PS1 version, especially since it actually is still affordable to get the English version of it. Though I don't think SaGa Frontier came out in Europe, though. I think it only came out in America English-wise, so Europeans will probably have a harder time on that. So price range. What would I give the value of SaGa Frontier Remaster? It's a pretty good, faithful new version of a really interesting and still very bizarre JRPG. To this day, still one of the most bizarre JRPG. Like, it would be very easily on like one of my top 10, 20 bizarre JRPGs. Very bizarre and untraditional JRPGs. Hell, pretty much that would, almost all the SaGa games would probably make up that kind of list, honestly, to be fair. But what would I give the value to this? I think SaGa Frontier is a good $39 price tag, honestly. I think it's still a very good game that holds up to time. I think it's fun, especially if you're looking for something different. I think it is pretty decent. And I didn't experience any massive bugs or anything with it either. I did play it unpatched on the Switch. And, you know, the Switch version's usually the version that's going to have more fucking issues. And I didn't experience any bugs or anything. It was just simple and clean. Though there is a patch, so apparently there was something they poked around with, but I didn't have anything hinder my experience, so it was all good and dandy though. So I think it's a good value for $39.99, which means I overvalued it. Maybe I'm a little biased because, like I said, I did play as a kid. Maybe I am a little biased, but digitally wise, this game is selling for $24.99 on everything except for mobile. On mobile, it's selling for $19.99 digitally. So, you know, if that's your cup of tea, you can save a few extra bucks and play it on mobile. Honestly, yeah, I'd probably just go with the Switch version. And, of course, if you want physically, the PS1 version, if you want to go that route, goes around $30 range. Loose, around the $40 range for complete. And if you're crazy and you want a sealed copy, around the $100 range. So good luck on that. But yeah, you could still get a disc for actual reasonable price, considering a lot of Square Enix's other, or how I should say, Square Soft titles on the PS1. So many of them are so fucking expensive now. You know, honestly, that's actually a pretty good price, really. Now, if you want the remastered physical edition, which again I say is only available on the Switch, however, may change in the future possibly. Like I said, with SaGa, Romancing SaGa 2 getting a physical version now after it came out quite a long time ago. Let me look up. Let's see. SaGa 2, so we can see. What, you gotta enter your date for this? That's kind of weird to see on that old Super Nintendo game. Let's see. It got released in 2017, and this year it's just getting a physical version for the PS4 and Switch. So I have hopes that there could be a good chance that the remaster for SaGa Frontier may still get a PS4 version, possibly down the pipeline. Obviously, I can't guarantee that, but it's possible, but it's up to you whether you want to take the chance of waiting, because, you know, I always say that you gotta be careful with these Asian English releases, because once they sell out, sometimes they go way high in price. Like, I always see that happening in the Soul Sacrifice Delta. Really good Vita game. It's just going skyrocketing in price. It's just... But it is still in stock at Playasia, and if you do want to get the Switch version, it's $32.99 on Playasia, so not a bad price, especially considering that's still underneath the value I gave it, which was $39.99, basically $40. I think it's still a very decent price. Oh wait, actually wait, I take that back. That's a limited time offer. Currently, it's on sale for $32.99. It is normally $39.99 on Playasia. My bad. So actually, they are pricing it at the price range that I think it's valued at, so it's on sale right now. Go buy it. I definitely recommend it if you're looking for something fucking absolutely bizarre when it comes to Japanese JRPGs, because it is fucking weird. Especially if you have no experience with the SaGa series. If you've played a few SaGa games, you probably know what you're going into. But if you've never played any SaGa game, you're in for probably a like, let's put it this way. If Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, Breath of Fire, stuff like that is mostly what makes up your experience with JRPGs, hell, even Pokemon, Persona, like, you're in for a really bizarre experience getting this. And I still think it's very worth playing. It takes a little while to maybe understand everything, but I think it's worthwhile to play. And those are my thoughts on SaGa Frontier Remastered. If you feel like you learned anything interesting, feel free to leave a like. If you feel like you learned nothing interesting at all, feel free to leave a dislike. You're free. And let's get into those sweet spoilers of what I think about each of the characters and what goes on, and mainly about Fuse, a very long-winded rant about Fuse. So, my original experience with SaGa Frontier, I beat Lute and Blue's story. Blue is the wizard, Lute is the bard. They are probably the two furthest fucking characters from each other in this, because Blue is probably the most normal kind of experience in the game. Like, Lute just literally gives you start he goes to travel, and then you literally gave him the freedom of the world, and until you find the one NPC you need to talk to that takes you to the final dungeon, there's nothing but all the side shit you can do. There's nothing else. Nothing in between but side stuff. But so the Bard storyline, probably still my high opinion that it's probably the worst and most boring. I was hoping they were actually maybe going to add some new events to some of the previous characters, but only the Mystic got new story content, so not much there. His story is basically about him accidentally falling into a basically a world domination plot where he joins Rebels and stops that. Pretty random, but his family is kind of involved in what's happening, but yeah, it's just kind of, yeah. You learn more about that, actually, in a few other Kyoto storylines. The superhero's story about avenging his parents and stopping an evil organization. One storyline was... It was pretty interesting. The first half of it's pretty linear, and then you get more freedom to hunt down the evil organization and that, finding their hideouts and stuff. Getting a few areas that you don't get to go to as other characters. The supermodel whose husband gets murdered. Definitely a very bizarre one, especially since it actually has multiple endings. Kind of a dick move on what contributes the difference in that ending, depending on whether you pursue Joker or not in the gambling area. You want to not pursue him when given the option to get the good ending. It kind of a weird thing to dictate that, but you know, that's what it is. Now, Fuse's story actually adds some to her storyline about like where the Joker came from and shit, how that happened and things, and that especially, and there's one very interesting plot point in it. See, Wen is her fiance, and she gets set up for murdering him. The original game never explained, because you see the body, you see his dead body. It never explains what that dead body is, because you find out at the end of the storyline, Joker is Win. It's a mask that possessed him. So it's like, what was that fucking body at the beginning of a storyline then? You find out that in Fuse's storyline, it's described as a clone. Now, apparently this was also explained in the strategy guide for the game, because there's like this novel kind of thing in the Japanese strategy guide, and apparently it also tells you that, but we didn't obviously get that. A little robot friend looking for his mission is an interesting storyline, as he has to stop basically a world-destroying giant super ship from inside, literally, like, in its programming. He features a very interesting, like, being able to change his body and stuff. Very fun storyline, honestly. My favorite characters, honestly, I like Blue design. His personality is an asshole. I like Wiki, and I like the robots as well. They are probably my favorite characters. I really like Wiki's storyline. I like, there's a song in Wiki's story I really like. But anyway, let's move on to Wiki, though. So Wiki, young little monster from a monster world, and the world is dying, and they go to look for, well, I said they were pendants, but they were actually wings. I said they were pendants because the accessory icon looks like a pendant, but they were the wings. So the one person comments down in the comments, yeah, I apologize for that, but yeah, they are wings, not pendants. But goes on the journey to collect these wings that could supposedly save the world, but you find out you kind of got used, and the wings are like actually evil, trying to either destroy or dominate the world or something when you gather them all together on that. Sadly, it doesn't lead to a good ending for Wiki's world, as it remains ending. So they leave to find a new home, and I do think it's a important message to be able to understand that you can't always fix everything. You should try to help and fix things, but sometimes you gotta also know when to let go sometimes, because that can also lead to negative things, and I feel like that's an interesting message in Wiki's storyline. With the Mystic gets hit by a carriage as a kid and gets a blood transfusion with Mystics. She's a human, and she gets Mystic blood mixed in her, and it makes her a weird human-Mystic hybrid. She also has multiple endings, which can lead to good, neutral, or really evil, depending on, again, a very strange thing you might not necessarily think would affect endings that's near the end, along with what she does in combat, whether you use her mystic abilities or not can also affect that. But getting the evil one, you have to do like a particular thing that happens near the end of a storyline, so she can basically end up either ruling the mystic realm, kind of let it be a free place, or return to her human life. It, you know, a little subjective. That now Blue's storyline is a really interesting tale in my opinion. So you start out, you get sent out to go, you're basically told to go kill your brother. And you go to gather the gifts of the magic. You pick what kind of magics you want to learn out of the yin-yang system. And once you get one of each side of magic, you go and face your brother in a one-on-one duel. And the game fakes you out with a fake ending, and the game actually continues there, where what happens is the one that wins absorbs the other. So if you lose, you actually finish the rest of his storyline as his brother, but the loser gets absorbed by the winner, and they gain all of their magic. So they become... The idea was they were trying to create a way somebody could learn all magic, even if they countered each other, and this is how they did it. And the reason is because at this point, hell breaks loose on his world, and you have to go and fucking go seal it. Now, Blue's storyline was famous for not actually having an ending. You kill the boss, and then it slows down and turns black and white and just says end. That's how his story ends. Fuse's scenario, again, does become interesting with Blue in this sense, because it actually gives two endings, one to Blue and one to his brother. So that you get two endings out of his with Fuse. So that was a bit interesting. Again, some of the loot, I was kind of hoping they would add more to this, and through Fuse, they did. And with Fuse, as I said, they didn't do his scenario, and he does a quick kind of synopsis of each character's storyline that just kind of rushes towards the final boss, and then, you fight the final boss. You do get a moment to be able to run around the world or that before that, but once you go to the final boss, you go to the final boss of their storyline. And they did add new music to Fuse. Like, Fuse has a completely unique bass track that's used for all the bosses, and I don't really like it personally, but it's used for all the final bosses of everyone's storyline. Don't particularly like it myself, so... Now, like I said, you do get a dev room when you beat all the 7 characters. The 7th character beats the game, their team will go to the dev room. Now, when you finish all the scenario... Well, not all of this. When you finish a scenario with Fuse, you will go to the new dev room. Now, both of these dev rooms have lots of fun, quirky stuff. Like, I miss dev rooms. That fun stuff, though. Lots of fun stuff in dev rooms. But, both dev rooms have unique, weird fights and stuff in that. And that's why I would want something that I was hoping led to new story content for Fuse, but actually a new super boss. So, Fuse has a system. You have to recruit all the 7 main characters, or Blue's brother. He counts for Blue as well. So, one or the other or that, because you can't have both of them. Actually, I'm not sure. Can Fuse even recruit Blue's brother? I don't think Fuse can recruit Blue's brother now I think about it. But anyway, you need the 7 main characters. And what you have to do is, there's a meeting room you go to before you go to the final boss of the storyline you're currently in. And you have to talk to each of those characters in that meeting and fight their final boss there. And whatever one is the 7th one you fight will be a harder, unique version of that boss that has new moves and abilities that originally did not have. So, essentially, you can have 7 unique, super fucking monster bosses of the final bosses. And if you're sadistic in that sense, that's probably some extra fun you can have. Whole new bosses. Like, I've seen people with topics farming unique gear that only appears in Soul and Calibur storylines. Like, it's like I'm gonna run through it like 7 times to farm the gear for everyone and shit. For these super bosses and things. I'm not usually into most super bosses unless they have more connection to the storyline. So I wasn't too concerned about it. But I have considered maybe looking into trying it maybe randomly one day when I'm not doing massive overtime, trying to keep things going to that. But that's essentially what Fuse really comes down to. It's just kind of adding more filler to the game. And like I said, I feel like that's the case because New Game Plus overall will make the game faster unless you intentionally make it harder. If you're using the benefits of New Game Plus instead of making it challenging with New Game Plus, you're going to get through the character storylines way faster than you will normally intended in the PS1 version. I really feel like that's why Fuse was designed the way he was just to add some extra time to the game, and that's why I feel very scuffed about his inclusion. I would have much rather had even something barely resembling whatever the original storyline idea behind Fuse was going to be, but that's not what we got, sadly. But it's new content, and like I said, there's super boss stuff if that's your cup of tea. But that's SaGa Frontier Remastered. I recommend it, definitely, especially if you're looking for something bizarrely different than JRPGs, my friend, because it still fits that bill. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave a comment down below, and I will see you next time in the Proving Grounds. I got another time period to fly to. Off to Romancing SaGa 2.